So, Leigh, thanks for joining me. Tell me what you're here to talk about today.
We are here to talk about the 5 biggest mistakes when implemented a CRM system.
Leigh, tell us a bit about yourself and your background and how you came to start your own business and what you're doing and how you help people today.
I left school at 16 and I didn't really know what to do with myself. I tried college, that didn't work. By the time I was 17, I was working in an IT department in the NHS actually, and the office was located next to the mortuary. So yeah, that's sort of where you expect to be when you're working IT, isn't it? Fast forward to about 2010, I was working for an IT outsource company called Bridge Partners. They were selling internet and some bits and pieces like products and services we call. Fast forward, and they spanned that, became its own business. That products and services, it became an internet service provider. 2 years later, I headed that up, became the MD, and that evolved into a 3 million turnover business with 27 staff. That's how I transitioned from IT to business and learned about business. In 2019, I went to an event called Zoholics, which is the main event, the main Zoho event in the UK. They have them all over the world. And went to that because I was implementing Zoho in the business because we were at that size and scale where we needed to have some joined up processes and systems, and Zoho seems like a good option. And when I was there, I had a kind of a bit of an epiphany, really. I felt like I was at home. I just felt like this is potentially my future being at this event. Bridge Fibre was sold in about 2020. So I was trying to figure out what to do. I'd worked with a Zoho partner while I was MD. So they actually employed me for a while. So I went from being MD to an employee, which I couldn't adjust to be honest, because I was used to being a managing director.
You became unemployable.
Yeah, I became unemployable, I suppose. Yeah, I did. But yeah, I enjoyed some of the elements of working there. I wasn't the owner of Bridge Fibre, but I kind of had a taste of, running my own thing. So for that brought me to 2022, where I decided to have I decided I wanted to do Zoho consultancy. The doors were actually closed to become a Zoho partner. We can explain what Zoho is in a minute, because I'm sure a lot of the listeners have no idea what Zoho is. I started to be a Zoho consultant, which is Zoho is a suite of business system apps. I thought it'd be great if I could be a partner as well, because I weren't accepting new partners at that time. I did manage to become a partner. That's kind of another story. But yeah, so I think that hopefully sort of brings up to date as to why I am a Zoho partner now.
Yeah, well, and obviously you mentioned Zoho a few times, and I'm kind of familiar with it in parts and things, but maybe for people who don't know what it is, do you want to give us an overview of it?
The way to describe it springs to mind, they're like another Microsoft or Google, but they're the one you probably haven't heard of. They are as good as those products, in many ways. All 3 of those vendors have pros and cons. Zoho has pros and cons. It's better in some areas, it's not good in others. But for me, as a whole package, is what it can offer to SMEs in particular, and enterprise, I guess, but I mainly focus on SME. It is unparalleled in its entirety as a package. So the sum of its parts, I think it's a phenomenal package. Another interesting fact about it is it's a bootstrapped company as well. So it's had no external investment. It's been built from, the founders just building it slowly and over 20 odd years. I think it's 27 years or thereabouts at the moment, 27 years old. And it's only last year it became $1 billion revenue company.
You're now your own boss. You've got your own business. So what is the name of your business, and how long have you been running that now, and kind of who are you working with?
It's just over a year old now, the business. In terms of when I left the Zoho, when I was from employment to starting the business was actually established a bit before that. It was just sort of an idea. So if you look at Company's House, I think it was established in 2020. Yeah, the actual business has been operational, just over a year. The company's called Work Grow, and it really goes nicely with the tagline, which is "We know Zoho." So the idea is Work Grow, We know Zoho is the kind of the name and the tagline combined.
You started by telling us, you've got 5 things you're going to talk about, the biggest mistakes that people make when they're implementing a CRM.
So the first one is lack of clear objective. So what problems are we trying to solve, with Zoho or the CRM system of your choice? Yeah, it's good to think about think about that, because I think sometimes you need a system because you've got, chaos and you're trying to run the business from a spreadsheet. But it's good to think, what are we actually really trying to achieve?
In my experience, when you ask someone, why did you use that system? If it's a CRM or whatever, it's usually because someone in the business signed up for a free trial 3 years ago. Someone went, oh, we need a CRM system. Oh, cool, let's Google it. And then someone has signed up, stuck their credit card in, and that's what they use. It's really quite bizarre. Normally when I'm, and not just for CRM, but, if I'm ever speaking to someone, because obviously our customers who sometimes want advice to help choose systems. And I always say to them, well, look, in order for us to help you kind of need to start by helping yourself. So what you need to do is write a shopping list. So here's the things that we want the system to do. What are the deal breakers, absolute essentials? And then what would be nice things to have, right? Once you kind of know the things it has to do, then you can start to have a conversation. And I think that's maybe what you're suggesting, is you kind of need to know and have some sort of plan around it.
Yeah, we need to ask across the business, and it may, I deal with business size of, 3 people, the smallest, and normally up to, can be 50 odd. Often there's one person has a clear vision. It's good to tap into other stakeholders as well. Make sure we consider all of the different needs.
And obviously, it's Zoho consultancy, but from my point of view, is if a customer says, oh, can you recommend 3 options of a system that does X and Y? Inevitably, when you go back to them, there's more people in that meeting than what there was in the initial meeting. And you've now got 5 people going, oh, does it do this? And can it do that? And will it do this? And how does this work? And how does that work? And guys, it'd been really good if you guys were here in the beginning and you could have actually asked these questions. And now I've gone and wasted my whole time because now I'm going off down the wrong path for what it is actually you're looking for.
Yeah. And it is an art. There's an art because you can have too many voices, and I like to put a wide net out to begin with. And this applies to lots of to the other points, actually. You have to go quite detailed initially in all the needs before you can then I like to simplify everything as much as possible. But you have to do that wide net to begin with, to capture as much as possible and as much voices as you dare.
So as a consultancy business then, do you have your own kind of process that you take customers through to kind of figure this stuff out?
Yeah, it's an evolving process, as I'm sure you can imagine. So every project for me represent a slightly tweaked methodology to the previous one. The current methodology is to send out a Zoho survey, of course, and just, gather, send that to as wide as possible. And then that gives everybody a chance across the business to input into it. And then you can take that data, to the key stakeholders. That's a nice way to throw that wide net that I mentioned and then bring that into a workshop. I had a workshop recently which had the whole business in it, and that didn't really work. That was 20, it was getting 20 people. And but the learning for me there was to be clear about the volume of people that you really want in a workshop, because I had to take some culpability for not communicating that to them, then, turn up and there's, the whole company was there. So I had to sort of reduce it slightly. And the feeling, I hate to think that people are sat there bored, it just sort of puts me off really. So I like to keep it concise and have to keep everybody engaged.
20 people is quite a lot. You probably felt like you were trying to herd cats that day. It's this is good that people are, here wanting to contribute, but, we're not going to be able to give all 20 people what they want.
If you take 20 people, you'll always find, there will always be some dominant voices often once you get to that volume, and they'll take over anyway. It just becomes almost a one-to-one, which is fine. But then what's the point of having 20 people in there? I may as well just have it down to, 5 is really the maximum I like to go with at the moment. But yeah, so that's really about just sort of taking it back to the first point, which was, lack of clear objectives. So it's about casting that wide net and just really trying to understand what we're trying to achieve, why we're trying to achieve it. So number 2, and I've got down for that one, ignoring the user needs and training. The user needs is kind of a bit of a repetitive point. We've kind of covered that, I think. But the training is absolutely critical for a successful CRM system. And as much as I like to build a system that doesn't need training, I always try to build something which just leads people through. There's a fantastic feature in Zoho CRM called blueprints. You just press a button to move to the next step. And when you press that button, it tells you what you need to have filled in the CRM before you can move forward. and that's fully customizable. So I love to use that feature because it does reduce the need for training. However, you will still need to provide training and ongoing training as well.
But that's why I think it's important, if you're going to implement a system that's going to kind of touch all parts and all kind of people in the business, then the training is really important, because nowadays, like when everything's like an app, right, it's like easy to sign up for stuff. And most good SaaS platforms, they might have a YouTube video with lots of like tutorial videos. They might have that kind of thing when you log in and it takes you on a tour of the system. I hate those things. They're really annoying. It's like, just click, get rid of it, right? Just let me see it and let me play around with it myself. And then I'll figure out the bits that I can figure out, and the bits I can't figure out, then I'll go and look for answers for. I hate those tours that they give.
Yeah. Although when I do go through them, I'm sort of glad I did, but I do like to click through them as well. I think isn't that a man thing that we don't like reading the manual? It feels like it's sort of a bit like that.
First thing we do, isn't it? Chuck the manual away and then like kind of read it later. Do you know what I mean? It's like, if a man's ever struggling with something and he can't get something to work, always ask him the question, did you read the manual? Just so that he can look at you in disgust and go, of course I didn't read the damn manual.
Why would they do that?
Like, why would they do that? It's just a waste of time, you know what I mean? But I'm the opposite, to be honest. Like, I love reading manuals and stuff. Like, see, when I get a new car, I will literally take the handbook out of the glove box and I'll be reading it at bedtime. I'm one of these people that I have to know how every feature works, what it does, and everything else. Like,
don't get into Zoho then, because it will drive you crazy. It's too much to learn.
One thing that really frustrates me, right, is if I'm in someone's car and like there's something like a beeping noise or something, or I'm like, what does this button do? And then when they go, I've got no idea. I'm like that really frustrates me. How can you be driving a car? Like, could you imagine if you walked into the cockpit of an airplane and you said to the pilot, what does that button do? And he went, no idea. You would expect them to know what every single button does. And they do know what every single button does. But people drive a car, yet they don't know everything that the car does. I'm like, that blows my mind, right?
Yeah. But that's what I like to do. In the CRM, that's why I remove all the buttons. I remove as much as possible. So it's all, just the buttons that you'd expect to see. But even having said all that, you can't take all of the buttons away. You can't take all of the options away. So that's, so
Are you trying to say that you make it idiot proof?
I do try my best. Yeah. But
you can't say that. These are users. Sorry. What you're really doing is you're improving the user interface.
Yes.
Streamlining the user interface. There we go. There's a better terminology.
That's the polite way of putting it.
But I think the point here is training, and people do overlook training as well. Quite often, for certain things that we do, we will add like a training. Like sometimes, like if someone's migrating to like SharePoint from Google, right? We'll say, well, we should really have a half-day training session. Some people are like, I don't think we need training on it. It's like, well, okay, but you probably will. And your users will probably then have to raise loads of tickets with us because they'll struggle to do basic things that we could have just kind of wrapped up, in a half-day training.
Yeah, there's also, exactly. And, you can just think that a mail or, you tend to deal without that, don't you? Which has become a lot more simpler, isn't it? A lot more streamlined, I think. If you the cloud, do you typically have users on the cloud version nowadays or the desktop?
So for Outlook,
yeah.
Well, a mix. Most people have Outlook kind of locally with, Microsoft 365 in the background as their mail app.
And they still run the desktop version
Because let's be honest, the cloud apps are good.
Yeah.
But doesn't beat the kind of the full fat kind of desktop client, right? Because you're kind of restricted with some of the stuff that you can do in the web. And especially when it comes to things like Word on the web. I don't know why, but like if you ever open a Word document in Word on the web, it just looks terrible. The formatting's all over the place. The page breaks they're all in a different place. So I always just make sure I use the desktop app.
Sure. But we don't have that option in Zoho. So you have to use the cloud. But that's their only version.
Yeah. So it's good.
They're focused on that. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying Zoho Write is better than Word. I'm not necessarily saying that, but they are good products and they're focused.
I think when the cloud, if your only offering is the cloud, then you make it the best it can be. Whereas for Microsoft, it's traditionally been, you would download and install Word and Excel and everything else. The cloud offering is like an alternative version kind of for them. And it's just not quite as slick as using the...
It's like feature limited, isn't it? I assume.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just didn't know. So the reason for asking is I didn't know whether perhaps Microsoft had, moved more, fully embraced cloud, and it perhaps feels that they haven't. Perhaps their model is geared around the apps on the Windows laptop. Oh, they sell those, don't they? So they don't mind you having the Windows laptop with the software on, I suppose.
Yeah. No, I mean, the web app stuff is good. I'm not going to criticize it too hard. It's just that sometimes if you've created a document locally and then you open it in the web app, the formatting is all over the place, and it's just not as nice to kind of work with. And let's be honest, we like we like to use the things we're used to, right?
Yes, but yeah. So the training. So really, that's sort of bringing it back to the training. It's what I was trying to go with that thread is, even a mail client, you shouldn't take it for granted. Training would be valuable. How to use Zoho Word, how to use Zoho Word, Zoho Writer. Especially the CRM system, because you can bet that when a new user comes to that, they've never seen. They may have used Zoho CRM before, but it's going to be a customized version that's for that business. So we have to lead. So the training and the onboarding is absolutely critical.
Number three. This sort of relates again to what I was just talking about, which is complex and over customized implementation for your first build. I should add to that. It's important that when we do the first phase one, as I call it, or you might call it an MVP, a minimum viable product. It's important that we don't try and put all the bells and whistles in from the beginning, and just build a good foundational system within mind of where we want to be long term, all the automations that we want to have ideally, or at least some idea of what it will be. Get that first system built and operational, get that project completed. Otherwise, your phase one and your first project potentially could just drag on longer than you want it to, because you're trying to do too much with it. And then that allows you to get your users in and using it and providing feedback. Get them trained up on that phase one, get them comfortable with it. It's doing the basics. It's doing what you need it to do. And then we build from there. So it's easy to fall into the trap of, I've worked with, various sort of different kinds of business owners, and often the scale I'm working at, I'm dealing directly with the business owner, and they've got this grand vision on how automated they want absolutely everything to be. But I suppose actually that does relate, because what they've got themselves into is a bit of a mess, because they haven't really got the foundations right first and built that and then added on all the fun bits. So that's point 3. Automations and integrations is like the holy grail of IT. Everyone kind of just ever had a pound for every time someone said, can we just get that system to, send data over to that system, Of course, nowadays, it is a lot easier to have integration, especially when you've got third-party tools like Zapier and things. You can build integrations between systems a lot easier. I mean, I have a ton of integrations, even simple things that you think, could I automate that? The answer is usually yes nowadays for most systems.
If they're on the cloud, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's unusual if you can't integrate with those. Yeah.
And it's usually that question is that, if when something happens in this system, can it trigger something else to happen in another system? Yeah, you're right. I mean, automate where possible, but it's a good point not to get too distracted by all like the kind of shiny, sexy stuff without getting kind of like the core stuff kind of in place.
Get the core relationships built in the system. Yeah, and then add on the automations, and then you just to keep you're just constantly improving it. Then
it's cool.
And so number 4.
Welcome to Techcess, the show about helping you to get the right technology and cybersecurity in place to enable your business to be more safe and successful. I'm your host, Mark Riddell, Managing Director of M3 Networks. Over 140 businesses across the UK use us to put an end to staff complaints about frustrating IT problems.
And so number 4, I've got down sort of not planning for scalability and thinking about your future needs. So an example of that one that springs to mind would, not to talk bad of HubSpot. HubSpot's a perfectly good product, I'm sure. I think what a lot of people do, and it actually relates to what you were saying earlier, Mark, which is someone signs up for the free version. And that seemed great. And HubSpot offers a fantastic free version, I'm led to believe. I've not actually had a chance to play with it yet. It's on my long list of things to do. But it offers a lot for free. When you're 1 or 2 people, that's actually fantastic. As you grow, it might not do what you need it to do, and it might become expensive quickly. And I think HubSpot is quite a lot more than Zoho, for example. So yeah, that's a trap that I see a lot of people fall into.
I mean, just to add to that, you said it can become expensive. HubSpot definitely will become expensive the minute you start to have to pay for it. We've been down that kind of route. We don't use HubSpot, and particularly for the reason is this, that their billing is not friendly for small businesses. And what I mean is that when you start to pay for HubSpot, it's a minimum of 5 users. The thing that I found is that, we've got a lot more than 5 users in M3 here, but I don't have 5 people that we need to use like a sales CRM. I need like 2 or 3 users, and I've tried to negotiate, and say, well, we don't need 5. I'm quite happy to pay the per user price, but for 2 or 3, and there's just no flexibility on it. And I've even had the conversation and said, well, but you say that you are a CRM for SMEs, but how many SMEs need that many users, for a particular need or requirement? So yeah, pricing is a big issue for anything, but particularly, as you've said, some of these freemium tools are great if you only need what you get for free.
We invest your time more than anything into what free is time, isn't it?
Yeah, some systems, and we're not going to beat on HubSpot too much because
I'm sure it's a great product.
It is a great product for free, but the point is that a lot of these kind of freemium type tools are very good at giving you enough to get you hooked into using the system. But the problem is that if it's a year down the line that you realize that you need something you pay for and you've spent a lot of time and stuff into it, and you're now relying on it, you go, actually now we want to do a little bit more. Because that's the thing, as you've said a minute ago, start with the baseline. All the extra stuff that you might want to use in the future, you might not realize that you need it for the future because either you don't have a need just now, or you've done the sensible thing, which is what you've said, which is, get the basic functionality right, and then kind of build on, from that. And that's obviously the journey that, companies like HubSpot know that people go on. You just get your feet under the table, start using the system, and then you start to go, oh, it can do this, it can do that. And then you start turning on other things, automations and other things. And then you suddenly go, actually, now that's going to cost me like $6,000 a year, to get, or whatever it is.
5 users. Yeah. I mean, it's just worth mentioning, it's going to sound a bit salesy, but I think it'd be remiss of me not to mention, I haven't mentioned Zoho's pricing and their packages. So they have this incredible package called Zoho One. And if everybody the condition is that everybody in the business takes a license. The Zoho, if you use a computer, you have to have a license for it. But it's only, if you buy it annually, it's £37 per user per month. And that includes 40 plus. So it includes all the key apps, CRM, Zoho Mail, file storage. So it could replace Microsoft and Google for that. If you've already got Microsoft and Google licenses, we can take that off the £37 potentially, if you're happy to, move away from Microsoft, which not many people are, which fine. Yeah, it's just an incredible value for money package. So it's just worth, for your listeners, it's just worth them being aware of that. And it's totally scalable because you've got those 40 apps. You can start off with just what you need and it will cover almost 100% cover anything that you would want to do with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, yeah.
It includes a Zoho Creator app as well. I don't know if that's a low code app. So even if their apps don't do what you need it to do, you can build within that license, you can build your own app.
Right. Okay.
That will do it.
Okay. And in my view on the scalability thing is that's, I've seen it countless times where businesses went off down the route with a particular app or, platform. And then, 5 years later realize that actually it's now not fit for purpose because it can't scale as the business is scaled. So scalability, absolutely. We build scalability into, any network and stuff that we design, but it similarly goes along with software because I think a lot of people, maybe just assume that, software is infinitely scalable because it's software, right? It's not a physical thing. So scalability in software is kind of really important, especially if, and I'm not sure, this may be different for Zoho, but I'm just using an example of if you find out that there's a limit to the number of users you can have, So, I mean, and then we've talked about Microsoft and Microsoft Office, and it's the same here. So because Microsoft have enterprise licenses for the 365 products. And some people go, well, when do I buy the enterprise product and when can I buy, the enterprise product is a lot more expensive. And it's because it's after 300 users. So that's what Microsoft class as. So up to 300 users, you can buy Microsoft Business Standard, right? And that's the typical license that most businesses will use. After 300 users, you need to switch to enterprise licensing, and it becomes really expensive because Microsoft quite rightly say, well, if you're a business of that size, then that's what you should be paying. So let's be honest, 98% of businesses in the UK have got, well under 300 staff.
It's a small niche, isn't it? That's above 300 users, and they probably don't mind about spending a bit more money.
So I think that only leaves us on number 5 already.
Yeah. So the last one is a mistake would be to not continuously monitor and improve. Yeah. Continue taking feedback from the users, continue monitoring against your KPIs and your reporting, and a CRM system can always be improved. An IT system can always be improved. And I think, and I think most of that learning will come from listening to your users and maybe your customers, because, you might be fully integrated with your customers as well. Using Zoho, you might have it set up to a point that you're pretty semi-automated in terms of all of your customer engagement. So you need to listen to that. You need to test that, check that.
What about Zoho in terms of continuous improvement within the system and development? Are they pretty good at release out, new features on a regular basis?
Yeah, it's relentless. Yeah, it's non-stop. So it's a struggle to keep up with it actually across the 65 apps.
Well, you just need to read them manually. I mean,
read all 65 manuals at once. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I do. No, like you, I do geek out if I'm interested in the product. So whereas from IKEA and self-build, I'll try and I read the manual because I have to. With Zoho, I do actually read the manuals. I can't read all of them, unfortunately. I couldn't even tell you all 65 apps, if I'm honest. They do improve them. They're constantly improving. And I'm sure there will be some listeners that have used Zoho before. Maybe they looked at it 5-10 years ago and decided this doesn't compare well to Microsoft or to Google. They are improving all the time. So, it might be worth having another look. Even if you didn't think much of it when you looked at it 5 years ago. I use Zoho Mail. So I've used Microsoft products effectively since 96 when I started Windows 3.1 or, DOS back then. Word, I've always used Word and Outlook, etc. But when I started my Zoho consultancy, obviously as a fresh start, and I thought I'm going to use Zoho, I'm going to use all of their product. I love Zoho Mail. It's a great product. Really, really good. And that's because they're continuously improving it. It's improved, and that works across all of their apps. So yes, they do.
Is Zoho incorporating any AI technology into the platform? Yeah,
they have been quite some time now, actually. It's actually called the Zia. So you can see what they've done there. The Z, the A, the I and the A, and they've called the AI Zia. It's in development, should we say. They've got some strong ideas with it. It was really with the advent ChatGPT kind of revolution that happened, towards the end of last year. They have in the States integrated that kind of AI, the generative kind with the US. So in the US, you can tap into the, more GPT or generative style AI, but it's not available in the UK yet, unfortunately, due to this thing called GDPR, which seems to be getting in the way for some reason. I'm not entirely sure why, but they do have it. And again, it's something with Zoho. They might not be a bit like Apple, I suppose. They might not be the first to implement it, but you can bet it's coming, and it will be in the system.
I think anyone that's not already got it, incorporated into the system is definitely working on it. I just thought I'd ask the question.
Yeah, but we can hook it in, with using an API. I've got some projects where I'm integrating some AI automation in there as well, so we can add it in. But it is there in different shapes and forms.
And the last thing to ask then is, and we know you're incredibly busy already, but what is the best way for anyone listening to get in touch with you?
So the best way would be to go to my website, I think, would be a good starting point, because that will give you an idea of my pricing and my methodology. So you can go there, and I've tried to be, as transparent as possible so you can get a good sense of, what it would be like to work with me. So that website is workgrow.com, or I'm on LinkedIn. So you can find WorkGrow on LinkedIn, or my name is Leigh Partin, but dare I say there'll be some notes for the podcast. You better
go and click links to all that there.
And you might even find my mobile number there. Just phone me if you want. Let's have a chat.
Yeah, good to hear that you have pricing and things on your website. Obviously, a student of the Marcus Sheridan methodologies as well.
Not many partners will put the pricing on there. It's a bit out of context because it just says how much the volumes of time are. But what I need to add to the website is examples of project sizes, and then you can, small CRM would be this, medium, large. Yeah, you can get an idea. So you can, if you're speaking to other partners, you can straight away see what my day rate is. It just saves time, doesn't it? It makes it easier for everybody.
Hey, man, I'm all for it. Transparency, getting to the point quickly, all good. Thanks, Leigh.
Pleasure.
I really appreciate it, and I hope it's been an enjoyable experience.
Yeah, it has actually. I've enjoyed it.
If you'd like a quick chat with me about anything I've discussed in this episode, or you have a specific question about any aspect of your IT or cybersecurity, you can book a call in my diary. Just head over to www.m3networks.co.uk/meet Mark. And finally, if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to follow or subscribe to the podcast in your favourite podcast app for future episodes, where I'll dive deeper into other IT and cyber-related topics.
Techcess is an M3 Networks podcast. Find out more at m3networks.co.uk.